I want each of them to give you a sense of what impact investing actually is. And you've got two different types of organizations here. You have a private foundation, a network foundation that I'm proud to say we've partnered with. And one of the things that I'll ask Michelle about later is one of the things we partnered in very uniquely is making an investment into Anthropic. And that's going to surprise you. It's very unique, but we're shareholders. And that gives us a seat at the table. So that's the first thing that I want to establish. So Michelle, I want to go to you with your private entity and talk about how you view impact investing. And let's start with, what is it?
So first off, it's great to be in the room. Joint Center is like coming home, and I really want to thank Dietrich and the entire team here, my friend Troy Perry and Paul Thornell and so many others. And one of the reasons I'm starting with that thanks for both you, Ray, and you, Otis, and Joint Center is typically these conversations that we have. Hi, Kendra. When we have these conversations, they're typically in all white rooms. And so I can't tell you how important it is that we are both controlling the story, that we are organizing, that we are thinking about it, and that we are actually moving. So because I knew Ray was hard, I brought notes today. I don't always bring notes, but I knew who Rey Ramsey is. So look, I think the story for us around impact investing is actually, how do you move capital in service of a mission? That is just the plain definition for us. When we think about our work at Omidyar Network, we've spent for the last 15 years really focusing on moving resources to 500 companies, 30 different funds, where we believe there is a value and a mission alignment. And often these are companies or funds that are undercapitalized, they are early stage, and sometimes just our name opens up the door. Omidyar Network, because I know y'all like, what is this thing? Okay, so Omidyar Network was founded by Pierre Omidyar, who was the founder of eBay. He was one of the first investors in PayPal. And it was really founded with the belief that there's a social trust system between each of us, that we could actually use technology in service of the greater good. And so all of our work is really centered on that belief, that there is an essential good between humans, and technology can be used in service of that. And so how do we shape technology in service of humanity instead of the other way around?
Awesome. Otis, I'm going to ask you the same thing from where you sit. And he's worn multiple hats. He's in kind of quasi-governmental right now, but he's also been at Wells Fargo with their foundation, and he was at Rockefeller.
I also brought my notes and had the privilege of sitting with Ray before we came up on the stage, and he said, "You know it's going to be a different panel, right?" And I was like, I'm ready, Ray. So also just I want to give thanks to Dietrich and the Joint Center. It is a privilege and an honor to have a conversation with colleagues, and I am fanboying a little bit right now, because to the right and left of me are some, to use a technical term, bad mama jamas. So, in direct answer to your question, Ray, you know, it is interesting. So I currently lead the Economic Development Corporation for the city of Baltimore. It is America's largest independent city. I have the privilege right now of serving an African-American mayor in a state that has the only African-American governor. Because we don't have a federal government right now, it has been interesting that the partnership that is occurring between the state and the city is better than it has ever been, and I would argue in the 296-year history of the city. I think it's interesting also that the city, which has been majority African American since the 60s, I'm the first African American male to run the Economic Development Agency. We need to cry instead of clap on that one. But because it is an interesting reality in terms of what has occurred throughout Baltimore's history. I raised the fact that I'm at an economic development agency. As Ray mentioned, I've had the opportunity over the course of my career that actually very early in my career, I had the privilege of sitting at the knee of Ray when he was at Enterprise. But throughout my career, I've had the privilege of deploying over $1 billion in over 30 nations, primarily within the U.S., but in Asia and in Africa. But in the U.S. work particularly, I've seen throughout my career, there's been a misnomer or a misunderstanding of what impact investing is, right? We see it as transactional. We see it and measure it often in outputs instead of outcomes. And it is, people get a pat on the back and recognition for how many dollars deployed as opposed to how much impact really occurred. Right? And I think that's really important. So as in doing the work right now around economic development, particularly within the city of Baltimore, what convinced me after much negotiation to come into this role and to work with Mayor Scott was I said, well, what is your vision for economic development? And if he had said, I want to create more jobs for Black people, I would have walked, right? And I would have said, no, thank you. What he said instead was, I want to create generational wealth. I'm looking for transformation through the economic development engine. And so the deployment of capital, whether it's philanthropic capital, banks, financial institutions, government, the deployment of that capital towards transformation and not just transaction is true impact investing, right? And we can measure whether we've been successful if 10 years after that deployment has occurred, if true transformation has happened. And by that I mean, and then I will shut up and turn it back to Ray.
I was getting ready to grab you.
I saw that. By that I mean whether there is business ownership, real estate ownership, or transferable wealth in terms of economic mobility that someone has moved from here to here. Those are ways that we're measuring whether or not we're being successful in terms of the ED, and that's how we can measure whether we're being successful in terms of impact investing.
I'm going to go a little off book and ask you both a question, and it's a critique, even though I work in this area, and many of us work in this area. How do we avoid the trap of merely spending money rather than investing? One of the things I say to my team is anyone can spend, but few know how to invest. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, so let me just start by saying this. I think it is unique, and we're at a unique moment in history where we can actually talk about Black people being in control of $1 billion of assets and moving those resources. So I just want to both acknowledge that many of us are living in the imagination of our ancestors and that like the gift, so I hold that. And I think what has often happened is sometimes we're so excited to be in the role that we're not thinking about the strategy. And so we fund programs, we fund that great single idea, and we're not actually talking about systems change, we're not talking about changing ecosystems, we're not changing ownership, we're not changing equity. And so I think in response to your question, Ray, I start with the frame, is this changing a system? Is this moving an ecosystem forward? Are we changing ownership? And if that answer can be met, if there's a yes, then we're moving in that direction. If not, we're just funding another nice program. We're funding an individual that has great charisma, and Black people, we know how to talk. We come from preachers and teachers, but are we actually moving the ball forward, that we're changing ownership and paradigm and narrative in ways that you can see where that investment is going to set a whole new system or a city in a new direction?
How does that work in Baltimore? What's your lens? for investing?
Sure. For me, in terms of my board and our investment committees, they are looking at whether it's transformational or transactional, right? So the ROI is different, right? In terms of what is called the CEDS, our Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, is focusing really explicitly on whether we're seeing things move in terms of Black ownership. So Baltimore is 62% African American, but only 12% African Americans control businesses, own businesses in the city. That's a huge gap, right? I'm not delusional. I know that gap does not get, we can't shrink that overnight, but we can be very intentional, and the mayor's been really explicit. Baltimore is the birthplace of redlining. I want you to be really clear on this. It's the birthplace of redlining. So what happened? Government institutions and private institutions made very conscious, deliberate decisions on policies and programs to create an environment where Black folks were not able to acquire wealth and maintain wealth. So now we have to be as intentional in reversing that and shrinking that gap, right? So we're measuring it in terms of whether we see real success in terms of ownership, business ownership, real estate ownership, right? Provide contextualized technical assistance to Black and brown businesses and women entrepreneurs, because they deal with different trauma, different issues, different challenges. And then I just want to really double click on something Michelle said. It is, and that also in your opening comments, right, you talked about there have been so many programs. Della Clark, a bad sister who's been running a CDFI in Philadelphia, and some of you may know her, she has a term called pogroms instead of programs. Pogroms, she calls them. Right, and we've all seen it, been a part of understand it. I challenge everyone in this room, first of all, also looking out on these beautiful, brilliant Black people, and all of you in this room, to do everything in your power to not just be participating in those programs, right? To be thinking about transformation. Right? We can be tactical or we can be strategic, and at this point in history, given what our ancestors have sacrificed for us, given the work that has been done, we can be really strategic, and that means really measuring our success not based on those superficial kind of outputs, but really thinking about outcomes and what that takes, and that's the long game, right? But we're in positions now where we can think about the long game, the investments, the decision that Ray made as it relates to who managed that money, right? He knew that would not be an overnight thing, and he knew he was fighting against a system that said we couldn't do it. When I fought hard to get Brown Capital to be one of the first African American money managers to manage a piece of Rockefeller's endowment, they were like, this can't happen, right? They haven't been tested. When they outperformed all of their white counterparts, then they got a larger portion of the endowment, and surprise, surprise, it wasn't a surprise to us, right? But I say to say that you have to be thinking in terms of the long game, and you have to have thick skin and be able to take the punches in the face and the chest and some of the stabbing in the back that will occur when you try to fight for transformation.
I want to thank you. I want to seize on the word strategy.
Yes.
For a moment, and again, start with Michelle, and then let's talk about it a little bit, and then we've got a few other topics to get into. Strategy ultimately is about making choices, and it's also about the things that you will pivot toward, but the things you will pivot away from. And so I'd like you to think about that. Give us an answer about the things you're going to move toward, but the things you're going to move away. And the reason why it's important to have both, it's an acknowledgement, going back to what I was saying, is not all the things we did worked.
That's right.
And if we're never willing to say that, you never get progress. You just keep layering and layering and layering, or blaming, and we have to own it.
I'm taking notes. Otis and I are laughing because I'm telling you, Ray is the OG, and so whenever and seriously, I do think it's what's beautiful about like spaces that we have here, and why it is always still important to kind of fund the convenings, are that there are few moments where people get to pause and you get to pick up on wisdom. And what he's dropping is wisdom. So if you don't have a pen and paper, run to the back and get something. To the question, you know, I'm the first Black woman to run the philanthropic venture in its, you know, almost 20-year history. What I recognize is even as I stepped into this role and I'm hitting my 100 days, I had an amazing sponsor, mentor who was the CEO before me, but who was intentional about setting me up with my board a year and a half before, so that there was relationship. Why am I starting there? Because sometimes you have to build trust with certain actors. So when I made a move to say we're not just going to fund conversations about work and workers in a workforce only manner, but we were going to move some of our grant capital to investment capital, I needed to pull on the trust that this sponsor that I had that went before me gave me the opportunity to do. And that strategy, that was a conversation we had 2 years prior, because here comes this Black girl who didn't come out of a VC who's saying, trust me, I want to move money from grants to our investment capital, so when we had an opportunity to become a shareholder in one of the most profitable AI frontier companies, that they would trust that we were moving in a direction and that there were people who could move there. And what that also meant, and this is the honest truth, I have to say no to a lot of great organizations who were doing good C3 work. And that's just the truth of the matter. Sometimes when you have, and I don't want to come from a scarcity mindset, but I do want you to understand that even as we sit in these spaces, you're still going to hear a lot of no's. That doesn't mean that your idea or the fund that you're starting isn't a great one. One of our partners, Collab Capital, led by Jules Burke Solomon, she's a Google alum, hey Chanel, is an alum of some of the most prestigious companies, had sold a number of companies before she launched her fund in Atlanta. She's now funding over 40 companies, 500 employees, 13 states. But she had so many no's before she got a lot of yeses. And I just need to say that because I think people feel like because you get a no from me, you have to pivot your strategy. You just may not be moving in a direction where I can fund right now because I need to create more capital for my organization and that then gave me the opportunity to a year later fund into Jewel, right?
I want to just commend, we need more Michelles in this field. And I spent a lot of time with the individuals she's talking about, Michael, and we were actually talking about her a lot as being the next person, you know, coming up. And I was so excited when it finally happened. I was almost, Mike is really good, but I was like, move, you know, so that she could get in. And I want to say really quickly about the Anthropic thing, which is so unique, is we had a fast-breaking opportunity that was presented in philanthropy. And there were only 3 foundations, philanthropic organizations, who could move with the innovation and the speed to be involved in this. Ford, Nathan Cummings, mine, and of course, Michelle with Omidyar. And so we're part of the cap table. So when you hear them going to market, we're part of that. And then that money is going to filter out so that we can do good. But it also gives us a chance to have conversation with them and seeing what we have to avoid, which is a false choice of, well, this is the bad guy, we don't talk to them, these are the good guys. You're talking about, we need to be in all of the rooms. And so that's part of it. And so be wary when you hear that. That might get applause lines, but it's not that smart.
That's right.
Otis, strategy. So you're at a city, you know I'll pick on cities. Of course. And so what are you changing in Baltimore? What are you moving from, and what are you moving toward?
Sure. So first I want to kind of double click on what you said earlier just around learning from our failures. So what are we moving towards? We have a policy around kind of fail fast, learn fast, fix fast, right? Fail fast, learn fast, fix fast. That is antithetical to what people think about with government. Right? And government, often you spend a big chunk of your time trying to figure out when something is broken, who to blame, and then spending a lot of time talking about that person instead of fixing the problem. That's no longer our way that we're trying to operate. And so that is first and foremost really crucial to moving from kind of a tactical, just responding to this problem and that problem towards a more strategic approach to the work that has to occur. Fail fast, learn fast, fix fast. So on the capital side, in terms of how we're investing our dollars that go towards this strategy, it is really resting in our power, no longer having an attitude, and I will say this very respectfully, please do not be offended by what I'm about to say, but I'm on the stage with Ray, so I can say anything. Baltimore had operated like a very attractive man or woman who was brilliant, who was dating beneath themselves.
Well said.
And Mayor Scott and the current administration finally looked in the mirror and checked themselves and was like, I'm dope, right? That's a technical term for I'm dope, right? And the reality was that when you stop acting like that you are at a deficit, and when you stop behaving in a way in which you are grateful for a developer who comes to town or and says, we will give you a couple of beads for your property, when you stop thinking that way and start thinking more strategically, when you're willing to get up and walk away from a deal, it is being strategic and thinking for the long term, right? And so that's how we have shifted. So in every area, and I'm talking about not just how we deploy our capital, but which companies we work with. I was sitting across from one of the most respected kind of real estate analysis firms in the country who was doing some work for us. They're about to make vulgar amounts of money, and I'm sitting there. There was not a person that looked like me on the panel, and I said to them, we are very interested in your product. This looks great. I think this would be great for the city. I have a problem though. I can't deploy my capital when there's a lack of diversity on your firm because I have an obligation to the people of Baltimore. So that needs to be fixed, and then let's come back. And before you do that, be very clear. I'm not talking about blackface. Do not hire an incompetent African American because that's racist, right? I need you to make sure that you get the best in class. They exist. And then let's talk further, right? And they looked at me and said, okay, we'll be back, right? And I said, and that's not, this is, and I say this to say, rest in the power that you have, right? Know what you can and can't do, right? Obviously, I'm in a situation where I have an African American mayor who knows who he is, right? One would argue in many ways, though he's not the first black mayor, he's the first mayor in the history of the city to not center whiteness, right? And that creates a different way of operating, right? And so I say that to say, it is again now no longer tactical, it's strategic. The mayor is thinking beyond 4-year cycles, and that enables us to be really smart in terms of where and how we invest our dollars. And we're no longer doing backflips about the number of jobs created. First of all, these companies lie. But anyway, 500 jobs
Right.
with this, and then you check it, 10 jobs got created, y'all.
Yeah.
But can I just say
Go
also,
right for
I
it.
think it's important to think about you on the other side of the table. So it's not even just a question of like deploying capital, but it's having the trained expertise and background so that Otis was both in his power to say, we're not going to move in this direction, right? Like we just have to keep on developing those on the other side who know how to move and not just like deploy the capital, but they are learned and trained enough to say, I'm not going to take every deal that's in front of me. The reality is, if we're just talking about capital or just talking about how we can become the next VC, having 2 black Mark Zuckerberg's ain't gonna do it, y'all. That's not changing the Black community at scale, right? So we have to be creative about how to do this.
Michelle, I'm going to go right back to you because what you did opens up the next segment that I want to talk about, which is we hear this word systems and systems change. Now, the technique I use in my own organization, very Socratic, is I will say, I don't know what that means. I have no idea. So now I want to say to you, I don't know what that means. What does that mean to you when you say systems? And keeping in mind, capital can't do everything, but from the standpoint of capital, what does that mean?
Yeah, so such a great point, and I appreciate it because I think sometimes in philanthropy we have like our own language, and then people walk in the door and they're like, "What are you talking about?" And it's unfair. Delegate Janelle Wilkins. And it's not fair. I'm from the Black church. I just shout out people at random. I was born an old church lady, so Retta, everybody, I'm just going to do it. So just so you know.
Go for it.
But when I think about systems, actually, most of the time I'm thinking about power, I'm thinking about rules, and I'm thinking about policy. Right, and so Otis talked about Baltimore as the origin of redlining. And what that did is that created a system where there was housing and resources that were afforded to some people and exclusion to others. And so our job is now to look at that paradigm that people have to walk into, good housing in some parts of the city and bad in others, and then respond with a response that is worthy. And that's why I think sometimes we have a conversation about capital and investment, but we also are having a conversation about policy. Who in here works in policy spaces? Like you've worked on Capitol Hill or you've worked in state and local government. When you think about where you have the opportunity to change at scale, to see systems change at scale, oftentimes that's going to be policy and practice. And so there is often a conversation, and I just got out of the room with some members of the Congressional Black Caucus, where we're giving detailed recommendation on different policy changes that open up the apparatus for entrepreneurship, for funding, for diverse investments, and using the government, who was also responsible for stopping access and generational wealth, to now use those same levers to change the systems. So that's my response here, and I don't think we talk about it enough when we have conversations about investments.
No, and I love the way you broke that down. It's policies, it's practices, and it's people. And you bring all of that together, and you've got a shot at making a contribution toward it. I would say this, before I go to Otis with another question, is, and I say this to my team all the time, and we're gonna talk about in a few moments measuring. How do we know? But one of the problems in the world of measurement is we try to go too lofty, and it's important to have a long-term vision. But when you really get to measurement, it really is about causalities. And what we're doing, everyone up here, is trying to make a contribution toward, not trying to measure the whole thing and saying, I'm responsible for getting it all done. Because no one does that. It's not a solo journey. It is about multiple entities. And if we lose that humility, we'll have the lofty language and the measurement won't measure up, and we lose credibility. And that's happened. And if you look at other movements of money, the ESG movement, all of those sorts of things have been dinged. You have greenwashing, you have people taking credit for things that aren't true. So we've got to be careful with that. So Otis, in a city, and I'm going to slightly tailor the question to you, in terms of systems change at the city, I'd like you to sort of talk a little bit about how you meld in multiple sectors. Because as a governmental entity, you actually really need to work with multiple sectors. How do you do that?
Yeah, one of the benefits of working in government and at the municipal level, state level, federal level, is really that power of convening, right, and using that power in the right way. I think it's really crucial that we recognize, particularly when we're talking about systems change. I would violently agree with Michelle and everything that she articulated. I would add that I think infrastructure and power, in particular, are where you have the ability to kind of create the most kind of systems change, right? There's been an argument, and obviously the Joint Center is a nonpartisan body that is, and so this is not a Republican or a Democratic statement, but the reality is this, that often I feel like the Democrats focus in on policy and the Republicans focus in on power. And so we spend a lot of energy trying to get the policy right and then not necessarily having the power to implement it. There's arguments can be made in that regard. There was so many really sound, smart policies under the last administration, but they weren't executed in enough time and with enough expediency so that most of them got reversed by our current administration. And so I say that at the government level, it's focusing in on power and infrastructure. I will know that we were successful at the Economic Development Corporation if the infrastructure has changed, right? And by that it means the rules of engagement, right? Understanding the bells and the whistles, the levers to access. Well, that will be the greatest kind of judgment and measurement of success, that we have pulled in the right people, the right institutions. Baltimore, again, has historically failed to bring in the philanthropic capital in the right ways. They have focused in on Maryland and Baltimore philanthropic community. I was in national roles and getting annoyed. Annoyed how cities that didn't even compare to Baltimore were pulling in, 7, 8, 9, 10, sometimes 10 figures, but we were not in a position where we understood that you needed that infrastructure to really have systemic change. And so what I'm trying to do now, and in partnership obviously with the mayor's office, is just to really create that table where various institutions, organizations at the national level, international, because we're going after a lot of foreign capital in ways that the city has not in the past, to bring in those dollars so that we have a change in what money is coming in and where it's deployed, and that we're really clear to all potential investors of how we want to deploy that capital.
I'm going to stick with you. Brief answer. What do you look at in terms of metrics when you're doing resource work, when you're putting resources out? Give the audience a sense of your metrics, and then I'm going to have the same question for Michelle.
Sure, and super easy for me, and I'm very brief. Business ownership, real estate ownership, home ownership, and small business, medium-sized business, length of success. So in terms of whether they've been in business and making profit for 5, 10 years, 15 years. Those are how, and there are more measurements, but those are the key ones where we're trying to see, are we creating generational wealth? Are we transforming the local economy? That's how because you cannot do that if you do not own the businesses, if you do not own commercial property, if you do not own residential property, or if your business is not growing. Have you gone from a sole proprietor to now 5? Or have you gone from 5 to 10? These are, so as I'm deploying capital, as I'm looking for capital and where to deploy it, those are some of the top measurements for us to determine whether we've achieved success. And notice, again, I did not say how many jobs were created. That's right. Right? Because that has been the wrong measurement tool that we've used for way too long. And so that's
Yeah, and so Michelle, same question to you. Omidyar has made an array of impressive investments. What are the metrics, basically, that you use in your organization?
I want to start with this idea of ownership versus participation. For too long, we've been so excited to be in like a pipeline or you're the one. No. I want to talk about ownership, equity, Black-owned equity in businesses. The other point, and Ray mentioned it earlier, are decision rights, right? Who's sitting on the investment committees so that you can control the thesis of what gets through. Right? Too often, we have tons of, if there are, say, 3,000 venture VCs who are the center of gravity, particularly in tech, there's only about 70 that focus on Black folk. And often what happens is those folks who are on the investment committees say, oh, this doesn't fit, this doesn't work. So I want to see a change in decision rights and who's on those investment committees. And then finally, what we're going to continue to push, and this is something that I'm going to become like a huge advocate, is how we measurably close the capital gap. Right, so too often we have founders and builders who are chasing philanthropic or capital, and what I would love to see, and what I think would be a measure of success, is that philanthropic capital and that private capital are finding these builders and saying, I want to invest. That's what we see with about 5 or 6 people who don't look like us, that they are running to invest in these startups, running to invest in these builders. And one of the ways that we can show that we are changing the game is when we see that in reverse.
That's beautifully done. I'd like to, we have a little bit of time. I want to, since I know there's going to be more talk about AI, I would like to have the panelists talk a little bit about the role that impact investing can have in that emergent space. So, Michelle, if you could go first, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so one of the things that I also want to offer, and I really appreciated the panel before, we talk about AI, and it's this like catch-all term, right? So I think first to step back and recognize there is a conversation about how individual organizations are using AI in their enterprise function. And where you see most of the investment capital going and supporting startup is in the enterprise kind of functions. How do you make business more efficient and work? And often, we are not those, or you don't see capital flowing into Black-led organizations who are leading there. And when I say most of the money, I'm saying 90% of the VC dollars are moving in the enterprise direction. So first, think about, is that something that is a part of, or do you have a startup network of folks who are paying attention to that as an issue? The second area where you see massive growth, particularly around AI, is in healthcare and wellness. Again, not at the numbers that you see on the other, but that is where you see exponential growth, where you see VCs who are funding and paying attention in that space. Now, all of the things that we believe AI should actually fix, like education, healthcare, climate, you see less than 1% of VC capital moving in those directions, which is why we as an organization are also spending, I'm serving as the co-chair of an effort called Humanity AI that is working to coalesce philanthropic capital to fund civil society and public interest AI. And that means everything from creating more open source tools so researchers and academics can actually access compute power to answer and solve the problems in our community. So it's looking everything from there to also what is the imagination. You know, I see some of my friends who led these efforts in the Biden administration. We have to get creative about the type of tech future that we want to see, and we have to write it, and we have to say it, and we have to produce it. Every single one of us, raise your hand if you've seen a movie where the robots destroy, kill us, and we're dead, right? Like everyone has seen one of those movies, but we very rarely have an idea of what the kind of future we actually want to see. What does it look like for us to live in healthy, safe communities where we are using technologists in service? And so we are also funding those creators and those builders who are trying to give us a type of future that we don't see right now. And so I think that there is both a mix of where we move investment, where we move public interest AI in service of humanity, and where are new narratives in this space. And the last thing that I will just add here is a conversation about governance and accountability. And I know we don't talk about that enough, but right now, AI investment and tech stocks make about 1/3 of our gross domestic product, right? And that's usually centered in about 7 to 10 companies. Right? That's a tremendous amount of power. And so we also have to have a conversation about, are there accountability and governance metrics so that we are a part of saying, as a society, this is what that looks like for me. And for me, I think where you're talking about kids' online safety, making sure that there are innovation environments so that smaller, mid-sized startups, and by smaller, I'm talking about still 50 million to, $1 billion, but that kind of mid-sized range of organizations and companies, they continue to grow. And how do we create the ecosystems that make that possible? So I think there's a number of layers in that conversation.
That was a wonderful answer. I'm going to, and I told Otis I would do this, I want to just add a little part to this with AI and try to be very fast with it. What we have to be careful about in this conversation about AI is to be forced into making bad choices. There are people who are already telling you what is destiny. And I keep saying there is destiny and there is choice. And one of the things we have to do if we look at the digital divide movement, and I worked on that a lot with One Economy Corporation that I started, here's what we got wrong. And a lot of people got this wrong. All we did, a lot of people were focusing on, let me get people free computers and let me get them linkages. In our organization, we said, we don't want to use the word digital divide. You know the word we use? Digital advancement. And if you think of the word advancement and you closed your eyes, you would think of different things. That was a historic wealth opportunity. And so the exercise I often say to people, and in strategy, is you took a blank sheet of paper and drew a line, and on the left-hand side, you said problems. You would fill that up. Anybody who runs an organization knows your staff will fill it up. Problem, problem, problem. And our brains are trained to go to the negative, all the problems. But then when you write on the other side, opportunity, then it starts stretching you. Where are the idea side of it? But the great companies, the great organizations do both. They don't just work on what they perceive as broken. And if we're not careful, as people of color, we will be left in this column, and all of the opportunity will be in that column. That's right. And what I don't want to see happen, and I use the word gatekeepers intentionally, the same people who got that wrong want to gatekeep how we think this time. That's right. And we have to liberate our thoughts and say, no, we're going to think of it in a different way. We can have safety rules. We can do things that are smart and secure, but we got to open this up. That's right. And we have to make sure our schools are producing the students that can take advantage of this. Some of them are going to get great jobs, but some of them are going to be business entrepreneurs. What impact investing can do is make sure we have capital that can go to the opportunity side. And so the challenge, if anybody in philanthropy, is why haven't more foundations pledged to go impact? Because the truth is they haven't. They speak big, but many of them have not chosen to do that. This is a historic opportunity to do that. I'm going to ask you, Otis, with Baltimore, which is a very diverse city in terms of the different parts of its economy, briefly say what you would like to see from a technology perspective and how can you marshal resources to that sector of the economy?
What I'd like to see in Baltimore, particularly in about 5 years from today, what I'd like to see in Baltimore is for the nation to see it as a place, particularly in life sciences and health and health services, given the concentration of resources and intellectual capital in and around that space, is for everyone in the nation to see Baltimore as the place you go to get investments and to get the capital that you need to be the entrepreneur to start that business. I think there is a lot of talk right now around Boston and Silicon Valley, and as everyone in this room knows, the vast majority of VC capital and impact investing dollars and that goes towards businesses and entrepreneurs go towards white men. And so you have some brilliant African Americans and particularly African American women that they are dying on the vine because the capital is not there. I want Baltimore to be known as the place you go to get that capital and to get the level of investment and technical assistance and support, and not in and out, not transactional, but contextualized technical assistance, support, and most important, capital, so that you can take your business from here to there. And for it to be a reputation, a real Wakanda, a reputation of that, you know what, I'm not going to waste time, and respectfully, in Silicon Valley or Boston. I'm going to go to Baltimore, Maryland, because the government gets it, the academic institutions get it, the places of higher education get it, and most importantly, there are a ton of investors who say, you know what, the fact that you have melanin and ovaries is not a deficit, but it is something matched with your wisdom and your idea is something that I want to invest in. So that's what the goal is for Baltimore.
And I'm going to add, that's a perfect way to wrap. I'm going to ask Michelle to wrap by giving us advice on any of these topics that we've covered today. Anything you'd like to share, any final closing point about impact investing and how it can make a difference in Black wealth?
I love y'all, and I think we just got to keep on saying that to each other, because I think often when we hear both these numbers or the opportunities, we go to a place immediately of scarcity. I don't see that. I look out and I see abundance and I see opportunity and I live there. And you got to wake up every day and you live there, because there were 12 generations of our people who never imagined this room. And so look at what we have, and we look good. I know I look good. Y'all look good, but you got to own that and own the opportunities. I think Ray is so right. Often we start with scarcity and deficit only. But we are amazing, and I can imagine not just one city, but multiple cities of layered capital stacks where you have philanthropic, first loss capital at the bottom. You got an amazing city like a Baltimore in the middle who are being moved. That money is being moved by community-based organizations, and then at the very top, you got private, and you have institutional capital that's coming in, and that have people who have been trained to understand that work. That layered capital stack, I imagine in every city, and 56% of the South that is led by Black people or organized by Black people in cities all across that country. Like, I imagine that, I see it, I believe it. Some of that power is in that room. So my advice to you is see it, imagine it, believe it, and love on each other and yourself.
I'm going to conclude by saying, thank you, Michelle. I'm going to conclude by saying, remember, no one gets to define the boundaries of your destiny but you. Thank you all.